So we'll begin this morning by closing our eyes and following our breath. You don't have to change your breath or alter it or do anything to it. Just allow yourself to breathe. And as you breathe, allow yourself to settle away from your everyday life, those mundane things that call most of our attention. Or as Murshid says, the intoxications that are so intense in our life. Although everything is, but some things seem to crowd. So try to bring your intoxication now to your breath and let everything else go. In this concentration now, begin to focus on your heart, breathing in and out of the heart, purifying, relaxing, energizing the heart chakra. So that our focus now, our intoxication now is on the heart, wrapped around with our breath. And we'll say toward the one together. Toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. So we're going to continue our study with the third section on self-protection, and this one is called impression. The true Sufi is the Shahid Ildul, pardon the gender, the gentleman of the heart. It is in his heart where the shine of God is found. Or the shrine of God, In Salat it is said, "Let the star of the divine light shining in thy heart be reflected in the hearts of thy devotees." So I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but I suspect everybody in this room has, and often, that when you sit in class, when you do some kind of spiritual practice, somehow you become ignited by that practice. And that's what the Murshid is talking about, that shine. We begin to radiate in a way that we don't ordinarily when we're downloaded with family and work and bills and the car and whatever else is in our lives. But when we take that small breath, that still small breath, and begin to realign ourselves with our soul, then we begin to radiate. Then the soul, the heart, all of that begins to shine out. All religions teach love. That love alone points the way to salvation. In man, the bloodstream rises from the heart, purifies not only the body, but the mind also. I think for a lot of us, we don't realize how much stuff we take into our mind and then process that into our hearts, and it just sort of sits there because all day long We are dealing with life. We're watching things on the TV which may or may not be very pleasant for us. And we're also dealing with our own small ego as we go through our life. And all that stuff provides veils. I call it graying. It dampens down my shine until sometimes I feel like I'm just barely sputtering. It's like a candle about to go out. And then I have to stop and do something so I can get my heart purified a little bit and start it up again. Mind, however, is not located in the brain alone, but is associated with every part of the body, wherever there are nerves. Of course, all of us know that we have all these chakras and the nerves and the sympathetic nerves, and we have, through the wonder of acupuncture, we know that we have all of these channels in the body, and all we have to do is just touch one of them, and we can just miraculously realign our energies. In chapter 6 of the portion of The Soul Wince and Wither, there's a picture which has not always been understood. This shows the body is really within the mind, and the mind within the heart. That is to say, the mind has control over the body and is larger than the body, and the heart has control over both body and mind, and is much larger than either of them. Yet one has to turn within the body to reach the mind, and turn within the mind to reach the heart. So it's sort of like an expressway, and you have all three coming together, but you have to go from one to the next one to the next one to reach into the heart, to finally find that source inside of ourselves, that beginning, that energy which prompted us into incarnation, and will leave us this body coat when we go and travel back to its source. When one considers the value of zikr, of meditation, and other practices, one can see that they are for nothing more than to bring the full life of the soul to the surface. Yet this action is for the very purpose of life. God created humans so he could experience life on the surface, and these practices not only awaken the heart itself, but also develop the heart qualities of love and compassion. So let's do a practice right here before we go further, the practice of just ishq, which is just love. Okay? So think of all the different kinds of love that there are, but basically that overwhelming, singular love of the soul, of the one for creation. Ishq, 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 ishq. And let's do Allah, 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 Allah. But the heart is more than the seat of morals. It is the shrine of God, and God becomes all knowledge. It becomes every minute of our lives, and there is nothing in life without which it does not have some reflection or correspondence within. The heart is more than the seat of morals. In it is the shrine of God, and with God comes all knowledge. It comes every minute of our lives, and there is nothing in this life without which it does not have some reflection or correspondence within. So that everything we see, everything we do, everything we are, all that is the reflection. If we are tuned in, if our heart is open, when our heart is open, then that energy comes through and we can reflect that power of God back into our lives. If we are shut down, if we are closed down, then that reflection doesn't happen. What happens usually is our mind takes over, our small ego takes over, and our heart has very little playtime. The still small voice becomes even stiller, even smaller. But what we want, what we're striving for, is to have that reflection, the God reflection, at all times, at every minute of our life, with every breath of our life, so that we have that remembrance, which is what zikr is, to bring our attention then back from the tempest in a teacup, as Pure Light was so often to say, to the real being of ourselves, to the really energizing portion of ourselves that gives our life meaning and existence. But everything that we see, of course, is then a reflection back of us, in front of us, beside us, above us, of our soul, of the light of God. And we can look at that sunset, or we can look even at that traffic accident and see the light of God. Sometimes, I don't know about yourselves, but for myself, spiritualizing my life means that a lot of times I want to kind of like move away from those things which are distasteful and traumatic. But I don't know when it happened, but sometime in the past, I began to think of car accidents as an opportunity, and I would start doing the Shafi Kafi every time I saw a car accident, and I would start thinking about those beings as I'm, of course, traveling down the road and not rubbernecking, but just moving on down the road, so that I could see, even in that difficult situation, that there was going to be some light of God pouring through, if we could all see it, if we would let ourselves see it and experience it. Impression is nothing but the call of the heart to the mind, which is constant. Constantly. It never stops. The call of the soul never stops. It never sleeps. The soul doesn't sleep, but we sleep. We sleep. Instinct may be called the voice of the soul acting directly upon the physical body without intervention of the mind. But with impressions, there is always a mental awakening also, and a communication to the nerves in the form of feelings. These impressions can never be wrong, and if heeded, become a source for the greatest protection. That's the impressions from our heart. If we're listening to our heart, that call cannot lead us astray. It's unerring. Ya Rashid. Ya Rashid. Unerring. If we listen to Rashid, the unerring, then we listen to our impression from our soul, then we act. Sometimes we have to do what Murshid says and take that still small voice within ourselves and take that little breath in so we can ignite that voice and make it stronger. But we have that ability if we'll stop and remember. Impression is very different from impulse, which is a blind desire to act suddenly and the impression resembles impulse only in its suddenness. So Murshid is saying that impression and impulse are sudden, but one is from desire and the other is from the light of our soul. If you're one of those people who has got a slow rhythm and you're very considering of what's happening around you, that rhythm is not so hard to see. But for some of us, when our impulse is so strong and our personality is so intense, we tend to be impulsive. You know, when you're kids, everybody say, "Oh, you're too impulsive." You know, that means that you just act the minute your mind says, "Do this," you go do it. There's not even a heartbeat in between. You're just off and running. But we learn the difference between impression and impulse as we listen, which is what practice and meditation do for us. And meditation particularly helps us center in so that we can have that quiet moment. We know what that quiet feels like, so that when this impression comes in, is it our soul going to speak or is it our desire going to speak? Which one? But if we're used to meditating, if we're used to practice, then what we do is we try to listen for our soul and not our desire. Of course, instinct and impression can work together. Instinct is a means by which the spirit of guidance protects and preserves those who have not reached self-consciousness. And by that, of course, he means the real self-consciousness, not our little self-consciousness. Impression is more definitely a human faculty. If one heeds closely the words of Salat and greets Allah in all humility every moment of life, depending on Allah for all things, then the star of the divine light will be reflected in the heart of his devotees. And these reflections are nothing else than what is called impressions. So impression can be both a protection and an informant in our life, depending on how we use it. But I know we've all had many opportunities to listen to that impression and feel the hand of guidance working in our life as we move through our day, as we begin some practice of work or cleaning the house or whatever it is we're doing. That impression of the soul can then bleed into our life and it becomes our rhythm rather than our impulse, rather than our small desire being the impulse of our life. In our Western society, we have a little problem with that because everything around us is geared to make us impulsive. We're hyperstimulated in every direction that we look. Between color, sound, and movement, it's a circus, really, of competing things that all want your attention, want your impulse to do whatever it is they want you to do. Buy something, go somewhere, talk to someone, experience this, go there, go that. It seems like one of the hardest things that we do today is to just be still. Totally still. So let's have a few moments of stillness and see if we can listen to that part of our being which is our soul's reflection, our soul's impression, not the desire's impression. So just, if you want to, begin by following the breath, and then you can let that go and just move into what I call the grand silence and experience that quiet stillness. Amen. One thing more I want to add is that it's such an invaluable thing to have the soul's energy as sort of like a shield, that impression shield that takes you through your day, because then everything filters through that divine energy. And it really does protect our own body-mind structure, our own feeling structure as we go through our days, if we can have that light consciousness in front of us. And most of us need that, just given our situation in the world today. Are there any questions or anything anyone wants to say?
So often I've thought of impressions as something that was, in a sense, bad. You know, the environment that's so fast and all the desires to buy this and the density of thought in the environment. All these impressions I've often thought as kind of bad. You know,
Right.
And as I was trying to understand, there's this aspect of impressions that are guidance too. You know what I mean? And so it's a new way of thinking of impressions for me. You know, could you just share a little bit of the ideas in that direction?
It seems that if the soul is speaking, if I'm listening to the voice of my soul, what happens is that everything that I see then is an impression filtered by the energy of my soul. If I filter that with the energy of my small consciousness or my ego or whatever word you want to use, my personality that I've developed through this lifetime, then I get a totally really different reaction to the event. So it's like the difference between, basically, for me, it's like eating vanilla ice cream or eating chocolate ice cream. There's a richness and a profoundness to the chocolate, and that is more what I want than just the vanilla-ness of my own small ego. If I have the light of my soul, it provides so much energy, plus a different array of ways of looking at something than if I'm looking with my personality or my life experience. If I can go to that stillness and find that energy, then my reaction to something is totally different than if I'm going, well, what did he do that for? You know, because it hit right off my personality and something that's in my everyday consciousness from my life. Does that make sense? In some ways, it makes what I look at, everything that I look at, have a different feeling and attitude in my own being. I see everything then as an opportunity for the light as opposed to something to fight. I see everything as a way to then profoundly affect my mastery and my thinking about my small self, and not whatever my parents taught me to judge and to do this and to do that, whatever that is. So if I look at the light of everything, or Pure Light used to say, you know, casting the light of our glance upon things, when you do that glance through the eyes of your being and look with your soul, you have a different look at the world. You see things differently than if you're just looking with your ordinary consciousness, whatever that is. Then I don't go, oh my God, and I don't clutch inside when I see the accident. What I do is shafi coffee, and I think of those beings and then what they're going to get from this, as opposed to going, oh my gosh, it's terrible. One is expansive of my being, and the other one is contracting away from things, from natural repulsion of the body's, you know, endangering or whatever. We think of ourselves, oh, what if that was me? Oh, terrible, oh gosh. But if you think, oh, this is the light of God and how is it operating here? You look at that accident differently as you pass by, and it's this quick. You know that. You're driving on the road. You have a second and a half, 2 seconds, in order to make this connection. And what you take on down the road with you then is your reaction. Either it's the soul's light or it's the clutching, oh, how terrible stuff. One adds to your awareness and protection, actually, because the soul voice becomes stronger and stronger. And the other one just gives you baggage, more baggage to carry that's not of the kind that we really want to haul around all day. It is easier. I mean, for most all of us, that's true. I mean, to go to nature, to go to the beach, I mean, it's beautiful, it's lovely, that's very sweet, and you can reconnect. Of someone's beloved, a baby, all of those things bring to us that light of our soul, and we can get it anywhere. We don't always have to go to nature, but if we can't get it any other way, it's a great start, and it's a great way to feed ourselves, to go to that natural, harmonic environment. And until we can learn to do it, like you said, every day, and become more proficient, maybe we need that.